Hello, everyone. It is my pleasure to welcome you all to Jewish National Fund's Water, Wealth, and the Foundation of a Nation. For those of you who are new to Jewish National Fund USA, you may know of our work planting trees and making the desert blue. But we do so much more. We build medical facilities, housing infrastructure, parks, schools, and help people with disabilities. We also support economic development initiatives that pave the way for hundreds of thousands of Israelis to move from the crowded center of the country to the Negev and Galilee. The format of today's Zoom program will allow participants to see the featured speakers and the other participants. If you would prefer to see mainly the featured speaker on your screen, press the Speaker View button located in the upper right-hand corner of your Zoom program window. To switch back to see all participants, please press Gallery View. All participants are muted and are unable to unmute themselves. However, during the program, you can submit questions to the speakers through the chat feature. This program will be recorded. Now, I turn the program over to Matt Bernstein, Jewish National Fund's Chief Plan Giving Officer.
Thank you, Bethany. If anyone wants to ask a question, I know Bethany mentioned you could do it the chat feature. Just so you know, if you're not familiar, if you take your little arrow, go to the bottom, there's a chat feature. You just hit the chat button, type your question, and we'll try to get to it at the end of the program. So we thank you for joining us. I think you're going to have a really interesting program. I'm going to introduce to you not only a colleague of mine, but we've become really close friends because we've known each other. We've both been working for the Jewish National Fund for more than 30 years. So it's Talia Tzour Avner. She is a dedicated Zionist, served in the IDF admirably. Her professional life continues the legacy of her family, people who made Aliyah to Israel from all over the world. She's an energetic leader, dedicated to building Israel since founding a new community in the Galilee, and now she oversees JNF's task forces on water solutions and cutting-edge development in the Arava. She's an insightful emissary who helps connect the American Jewish community, the Israeli people, and JNF operations. So it's my pleasure, and it's an honor to have her with us. Terrific speaker. I think you're going to enjoy her. Talia Tzour Avner. Tali, it's all yours.
Toda. Thank you, Matt, and good to see you all and welcome. And I'm honored to speak here today, and thank you so much for inviting me. I'm going to share a presentation with you. I'm going to go slowly over a very I would say deep and a thoughtful presentation that will explain you everything about, almost everything about water and Israel. Hold on for a second. Okay.
Hit the escape button.
Okay. Is that okay? Does it look okay? Yeah, perfect. Okay. So, believe it or not, our Jewish National Fund is celebrating this year in the beginning of 2021. Its 120th anniversary because we were founded in 1901 in the 5th Zionist Congress that took place in Basel. And I always start, speaking in the casino hall in Basel with Theodor Herzl standing in the center, speaking to all the Zionist delegates around the world. That's where we all started celebrating 120 years of activities, of achievements, of successes, of building Israel, of bringing the dream to come true. And today there is a state of Israel flourishing, still with challenges, but we are there as a Zionist organization working all over Israel, but mainly in the periphery of Israel, i.e. from Beersheba to the south, from Haifa to the north, trying to grow the communities, to support the communities, to build stronger communities in these areas so that more and more Israelis would move and choose to live in these areas. And when Matt spoke about, I'm sure that every person around our world, if I'll ask him, what do you know the JNF for? They will immediately answer trees. But really, the variety, the spectrum of activities that the JNF is doing in Israel on behalf of everyone here and there is enormous. But there is a synergy. It's not just randomly chosen. If we choose, if our vision is to develop communities in the periphery in Israel, we have to think of every aspect. We have to think of the land. We have to think of the parks. We have to think of the medical services, both for, for residents who live in the community and outside of disabilities. We have to think of water. With no water, there's no life. After oxygen, if you don't have water, it's a big deal. And that's why when you go to these areas today, and I wish, we can all go back to Israel and visit on the ground what we're doing all over Israel, you'll be able to see the beautiful synergy between all the activities of the Jewish National Fund on the ground. And today, we're going to concentrate in water. So miracles, although we are about to approach Hanukkah, the holiday of miracles do not occur every day, and we do not get, unfortunately, water from the rock, and we have to plan in order to have water. So before I'm reaching Israel and what the JNF is doing, I want to give you a broader picture of what's going on in the world with water. So while in the 20th century, the world's population has tripled, the use of water grew by 6 times. What does it mean? It means that the bigger the population is, there is no correlation. The use of water is even more bigger. Why? Because water is not only used for agriculture or for drinking or for the bathroom. Everything that we see around us, everything that we're using, whether it's the chair that we're sitting on, the light that is on, the painting on the walls, the cars that we're driving, needs water. So the more the level of life is raising, the more we need water. And for that, the world has to prepare today. So by 2100, the world's population is gonna be 10 billion people. That's a huge challenge because, my friends, not all the world is the United States and Israel and Europe, where you have sufficient food and sufficient water and sufficient everything. The world has to prepare today. So within 15 years, 60% of the world will face water shortage. 40 out of 50 states in the United States expect to have some water challenges. The climate change is an impact. All the infrastructure has an impact, but the real result will eventually be political instability, because people cannot live without water. People will seek for areas and communities that have sufficient water within them. There will be a mass migration, and it will result rising of food prices. And of course, you can see, I don't have to tell you, wherever you go, whatever you read, you will see that Iran doesn't have water. Not that we care that much, but for example, Jordan, the neighbor country for Israel, has water in their faucets only once a week. Only once a week. Even in Germany, Australia, South Africa, this is all in the news on a daily basis, because the world does not have sufficient water and is not prepared to having 10 billion people around the world. And let's take a quick look at the freshwater stress around the world, what it was in 1995 and what it's gonna be in 2025, where you see that the blue areas have sufficient, while the yellow and the orange areas will grow and have less and less water. And for that, we need to prepare. Now, Israel, with the environment or the neighborhood, the unfriendly neighborhood, despite the fact that we do have peace, with Egypt and with Jordan, Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Iran, these areas, they suffer from the same shortage of water like Israel. But I would say, look at this neighborhood where the Middle East, you know, where Israel is located. The only country, only, you know, 72 years old, the only country that solved her water challenges and has sufficient water is Israel. And that despite all of the other challenges that Israel went through the years. So Israel must have done something right. And JNF, I will always tell you that JNF is the right hand, the right arm of the state of Israel supporting her. So before we're moving into, you know, the roadmap of Israel and water, I want you to understand something that is very important. When we look at the average use around the world in water, we'll see that the average, the highest percentage goes for agriculture. Agriculture is food, of course, but the highest percentage goes for agriculture. That means, my friends, that if, as much as we urge our kids and grandchildren to use, to take shorter showers, or to use less, you know, the water in the sink in the kitchen, that is not going to be helpful as trying to save water in agriculture. So the highest percentage is for agriculture, then comes the industrial use, and only then with 10% the domestic use. And it's very important to remember, because when we're gonna go over the roadmap of Israel with water, we will see what Israel has done also in order to save water for agriculture. So the former Israeli ambassador to the UN said, while many countries may not support us, the world is thirsty for our knowledge. On one hand, there's a market for bias against Israel. On the other hand, there's also a demand for Israeli know-how, and we have the supply. So let's see what have we done? What is the Israeli roadmap that led us to have, you know, to grow by 14 times from the time that the state was established, and to still have sufficient abundant water for everyone? In 1948, when the state of Israel was established, there were 600,000 people living in this area. The British mandate limited the Aliyah quota because they said you do not have sufficient water. You don't have water for more than 1 million people. Yet, Israel has grown tremendously, supplied today water to 12 million people, including the 9 million people who live in Israel, another, you know, millions of people in the Palestinian Authority and in the Kingdom of Jordan, with 50% less rain than what we had in 1948. So what is it that Israel has done? How come we managed, you know, with all the other problems, conflicts, wars, absorbing Aliyah, all the, you know, the challenges of the young country, what is it that we've done making plans so that the future generations will have sufficient water in the land of Israel? First of all, the main source of water was in the north. I don't know if you can see my arrow, the Kinneret, which is the largest natural reservoir lake in Israel. Prime Minister Ben-Gurion said, we need to, you know, transfer some water to all the new communities around Israel. Let's build a national water carrier. We have enough sweet water over here. We can pump water from the Kinneret and supply water to all the new communities and their farmers and their agriculture. But the situation back in 1948 or the 50s, or between the 50s and the 60s, when the national water carrier was built, has tremendously changed, because if there is no precipitation, if there is no rain, there is no flow into the Kinneret. There is no flow out from the Kinneret. Therefore, the Dead Sea is getting drier and drier, losing so much water and shrinking. And you cannot pump any more water and transfer it, you know, to almost to all of Israel, because you can see over here that the Negev, the Arava, is not connected to the national water grid, but still you have to make other plans so that we will continue to grow and have sufficient water. So what was the first step? the smart governance. With all the other challenges that Ben-Gurion had, he made a law, he passed a law that water is a national asset in Israel. It does not belong to anyone, whether you own a land or you own a property and you have 10,000 wells, you cannot pump, you cannot use, you cannot reuse, you cannot treat, you cannot do anything because water belongs to the country. So the country is the one that controls it, pump it, sell it, treat it, does all the infrastructure and everything else. So there is no private ownership of any water asset in Israel. Technology. Ben-Gurion, you know, in the 50s already understood. He already said, if you go to Ben-Gurion Hut in Sde Boker, he already said back then that if we could only take the water from the sea, take the salt out of the water and turn it into good water, that will be solution for the world. He said it in the 50s. That's the motto, that's the idea of all the desalination plant, and we will talk about it in a second. But there are thousands of new water startups in Israel, all working different directions, you know, different innovations as to how to use water efficiently, save water, and build a better technology to use that. National focus on education. Listen, Israeli kids in the kindergarten stand behind their parents when they're washing the dishes in the sink and ask them to turn off the faucet, to be cautious and to be careful for how much water they use. We all sing, you know, rain, rain, come, Geshem, Geshem, bo, not rain, rain, go away. The education in the TV, the commercials, the programs in the schools, the high schools, the universities, everything is about saving water. And by the way, just, you know, for you to know, the Sea of Galilee is known in Israel for the name of Kinneret. Kinneret is the heart, is the soul of the Israeli people. The reports in the Israeli news as to how much water there is in the Kinneret. The rain added so-and-so centimeters to the Kinneret. The Kinneret went down to the black line. It's the national mood. People are singing for the Kinneret, praying for the Kinneret, watching the Kinneret because they want to see the Kinneret full. So the education is another big factor. And then, as we said, 65% in average, sometimes more, sometimes less, is used for agriculture. Then Israel, you know, 15 years ago, 20 years ago said, you know, in fact, wastewater is also water. We can recycle this water and turn it to good water, into good water for agriculture, not for drinking, although we bring it to a level that we can also drink it, but it is used for agriculture. And Israel today is #1 in the world in recycling wastewater. 85% of the Israel sewage is recycled, stored in 250 water reservoirs the Jewish National Fund built all over Israel, and being used by the farmers. Guys, if you go today to Tel Aviv or Jaffa and you're looking for these orange groves, you're not going to find them anymore. They were all moved to the Negev and to the Galilee. You'll find them, their orange groves and the olive groves and dates and you name it. There's no water in the desert. All of these, you know, crops are being watered by recycled water and by Jewish National Fund who built their water reservoirs. And by the way, after Israel comes Spain with 17% of the sewage recycled, and in the United States, it's even less than 5% reuse of water. And when we're speaking about reuse of water, by the way, it's also an environmental factor, because if you treat the water and you reuse the water, you also treat and take care of the environment. So we're not in Israel. We're going to be in Israel, hopefully, you know, by the next spring or summer. But just to give you a flavor, a taste of what a water reservoir looks like in the lower Galilee, in the Negev, where everything is yellow around it. Today, everything is green because a lot of orchards were planted around this area and groves, and all the farmers came because now near the Besor river, they have water reservoirs. and so is another one in the Lower Galilee, and Mount Tabor, and so on and so forth. Then we spoke about 65% is being used for agriculture. So if there's a place to really save water is the irrigation of the food that we are producing, right? Drip irrigation was invented in Israel. Drip irrigation is very simple. It's not, you know, when you think about it, it's a drips with holes, and you can control when you water the plant, how much water, how much minerals, what time of the day, if to stop irrigating. But guys, what is so smart about it? That if you look at the rest of the world, look at Asia, Africa, areas that have nothing, you know, they don't have water. They use flood irrigation. I don't need to be a genius or an expert in water to tell you, and neither do you, to understand that flood irrigation, most of it goes for evaporation or penetrate immediately the soil, and that's it. There's not enough for the plant. Making plans as to how it's pricey. The drip irrigation is pricey. It was invented in Israel. Today it's useful by all over the world, but not enough. And if the world will be using the drip irrigation more efficiently and will purchase the technology of the drip irrigation, the world will save today water for the future generations and will have sufficient water. Desalination, another thing, very easy, just pumping water from the Mediterranean and within 30 minutes, turning it into good potable water. 10 years ago, 12 years ago, Israel had such a severe drought. We turned to Erdogan in Turkey, asking him to export water to Israel because Israel was, you know, on the edge of a big crisis. Luckily, he said no. And we were left with no other option but starting to build desalination plants along the Mediterranean. To cut a very long story short, 10 years later, we have 60% of the Israeli potable water coming from 5 desalination plants along the Mediterranean, with 2 more planned over there and 1 more in Aqaba as a joint venture between Jordan and Israel. We charge, I don't know if you know how much money you pay for the water, but I can tell you as an Israeli, we have a water quota. We can use as much as we want, but the quota, if I'm a family with 2 daughters, I have a quota. I can use what they give me to use and pay the, what I have to pay. But if I use more, I'll pay 10 times more. All of the money, all of the charges go directly for the Israeli Water Authority to improve the water system and the water infrastructure in Israel. So what I said until now, 60% of the drinking water comes from the desalination plants. Again, Israeli technology, 5 desalination plants, more than anywhere. The largest desalination plant in the world is located in Israel, and more than 50% of the water used for agriculture. And I'm reminding you, agriculture is food, and we have to also think about food security for us, comes from recycled water. So that's the 5 desalination plants all the way from Hadera, Sorek, Palmachim to Ashkelon. By the way, we even offered to the Palestinians in Gaza to build a desalination plant for them. The conflict or the fear from, the control of Israel over the water assets over there is so big that they don't allow us to support them and build the desalination plant. I once heard Seth Siegel, who wrote the book, Let There Be Water, saying that there is no water scarcity, there's a water management scarcity. And if you know how to run your water asset, you will make sure that you have enough water for today and for tomorrow. Another picture of a desalination plant from the outside. It's a huge factory, very noisy. All the pumps are working, but it's really, really impressive to see that. So that's basically the roadmap of what Israel has done. Now we have to look at the future, always look at the future. We started with 600,000 people. We grew every decade by almost 1 million people. We count today 9 million people in Israel. I told you we supply water. Even Jordan, in 1994, we signed a peace treaty with them. And according to this peace treaty, 25 years ago, Israel supplies 50 million cubic meter to Jordan every year. And nobody predicted, nobody knew back then that the precipitation will go so low. And the Kinneret, we stopped pumping water from the Kinneret. Most of the sweet water comes today, as you saw, from the desalination plant. So the prediction as to, you know, what will happen in the state of Israel back in 1948 and then every decade really forced the government of Israel and Israel's water authority and Jewish National Fund as a Zionist organization that deals with all of this infrastructure in Israel to look forward and to make plans. And today we have to make plans, you know, for 25, 50 years from today. And the prediction, the expectations are that the population in Israel will grow from 9 million people today to almost 16 million people by 2050. Guys, for that we need to make plans. Israel is, unfortunately, Israel doesn't live in the best, you know, neighborhood in the world. Israel cannot count on anything from its neighbors. Israel will always have to be self-sufficient in terms of water and food. If God forbid something happens, we have to have enough water. And I want to say another word over here about the desalination plants. As much as they're solving the potable problem challenge, if God forbid one missile with poison falls by the pumping stations or pumping points of the desalination plants, we don't have water in our faucets within 24 hours. So the Kinneret will forever be the saving account for water for Israel that we need to protect. That's why the Kinneret is so important. We do not longer pump water from the Kinneret unless it's for Jordan. But we have to keep the Kinneret as a good quality water saving account for the state of Israel if God forbid something happens in one of these desalination plants. So you can see the prediction of the population growth for the next, I would say, 30 years. And that's why we need to make plans today, like our fathers and forefathers make the plans for us in 1948. So how do we close the water gap? By water saving, right? Drip irrigation is water saving. Education and commercials and the young kids and everyone is water saving. Thinking of how much water you use in the sink or limiting the quota that you get at home, it's a water saving. We will also, our goal is to increase the level or the percentage of the reuse of water to grow from 85% to even 95%. And by the way, the more population we have, the more wastewater we have. The more wastewater we have, the more we need to treat. The more we need to treat, the more reservoirs we need to build in Israel. And we need more desalination plants. As I told you, 2 more desalination plants are planned, one in Akko and another one in the center of Israel. And a third one is planned to be built in Aqaba on the land of Jordan as a joint venture of Israel and the Jordanians. How am I with the time? I'm going to finish soon. Is that okay? I'm going to finish in a few minutes.
Yep.
I can hear Matt. Yes, that's fine.
Yes.
So now I want to, what was the Jewish National Fund or has been the Jewish National Fund role in Israel's water economy? As I told you, we built 250 water reservoirs all over Israel, adding about 15% to Israel's water economy. Guys, that's a lot. There's a request from Israel's water authority to build another 90 water reservoirs for recycled and flash floods, water. That is crucial. We cannot, just sit and wait to see what happens, 20 years from now, 30 years from now. We know today that we will need more water. Another thing that the JNF has been doing and is crucial, I didn't even touch because of the time limit. I didn't even touch the fact that water has no border. And part of the water is an underground water. We have aquifers underneath the soil that we're pumping water from. We have 4 aquifers in Israel. And the rehabilitation and restoration of rivers, by the way, you know, Israel is only 31 rivers, and you know, even the Jordan River has more reputation than water. We don't have that much water in our rivers. None of them is the Mississippi or the, you know, but to protect the rivers and to clean them, such as, you know, what we've done in the Beersheba River, and I'll show you pictures in a second. That's a big deal, not only because of beautifying the area or the vicinity of Beersheba, because once you clean and you rehabilitate the river, you protect the aquifer. The aquifer is another source of good water that we have under the ground. We built wastewater treatment plants, local and national. We helped with the recycling water. We helped with the drilling of ancient water in the north, 2 kilometers, 1.5 miles under the ground. Usually it's nothing. It's like a few feet under the ground, you already hit the water. Ancient water from 50,000 years ago supply water to all the farmers in the lower and the upper Galilee, and they cannot stop thanking the JNF because we saved them during the 4 or 5 consecutive years of severe drought in the last few years. Education, we're involved in building rain harvesting water systems in elementary schools, in over 70 elementary schools, teaching more than 90,000 kids as to how to take the water from the rain, from the sky, save it in containers, use it in their bathrooms, use it in their backyard, use it in their gardens. That's where it starts. And then we're supporting an international high school children competition for innovation in the field of water, where we're sending Israeli kids to the international competition in Stockholm every year. And of course, R&Ds. Without R&Ds, we cannot survive, because these farmers and these people who live on the ground and have to grow food have to understand what they can really grow and flourish in their areas. Let's take the Arava, for example, the southernmost area that looks like Nevada. You know, there's no soil, there's no water. It's over 100 degrees most of the year. What do you grow over there? So the R&D tells them, cherry tomatoes might be a good idea. This kind of flower can grow in the winter, and so on and so forth. Without R&Ds that are being constantly, through the years, supported by the Jewish National Fund, we cannot live. I didn't even put it in the presentation, but for your information, last month, also we're supporting a research on the existence of COVID-19 in the wastewater of the off-grid villages in the south, supporting them, you know, locating the communities that have, you know, a lot of COVID-19. So that's, you know, the newest research that we are conducting together with the Arava Institute. Speaking about the Beersheba River, guys, when people, you know, Russell and the leadership of the Jewish National Fund spoke about cleaning the river that is empty, building a lake over there, all the water that you see, the blue water that you see in the middle of the desert, in the middle of the capital of the desert, Beersheba, is recycled water from the city of Beersheba. I thought, you know, it was a dream, but the dream came true, and today we have a lake in Beersheba with a beautiful river park and promenades and new neighborhoods, and it brought life to the city, and it also protected the aquifer that I mentioned before. That's another reservoir in the Negev within the Lav forest. I spoke with you about, you know, the rain harvesting water with the tanks, where the kids collect the water from the rain and use it for the bathrooms and use it for the gardens. So that's, you know, another big component of our water plans, you know, for the next generations. So I'm done. Water scarcity is not over, okay? Until this year, Israel faced 5 consecutive years of severe drought. This year was very rainy, but it doesn't change the situation. The Kinneret, our main water saving account, is drying up. Part of Israel is not connected to the national water grid. The population is going to grow and be 16 million. We are still, surrounded by the same countries, and not all of them are friendly with Israel and want to support Israel. On the contrary, they're counting on Israel to support them if they, if the day will come that they will not have enough water in their faucets. So we need to plan and prepare today for future generations in Israel and around the globe. And by the way, everything that Israel is doing, we're willing to share it with the world. I always say that the water is not just water, it's the environment, and it's tikkun olam, because we're helping the world with the knowledge because of the reality in Israel to prepare for the tomorrow. If we do not play today, by 2050, we will not have sufficient water for the people who will be living in Israel. Guys, in the last 4 years, I led water missions to Israel, very successful in the footsteps, of every innovation, every facility, every water reservoirs, to really understand Israel's water challenges and solutions. Unfortunately, this year we cannot go, but as always, we turned the lemon into a lemonade, and we are running virtual water missions that I would like to invite you, and you're gonna be getting the information and the registration links and the information about these missions. It's only gonna be 4 days a week. We're gonna run the same mission 3 times, 2 hours a day. When we're gonna take you, we're producing it now, filming in Israel, and interviewing all of the water experts in Israel, so that in 4 days, 2 hours a day, you'll be able to really visit, all of these excellent solutions and challenges in Israel. That picture was taken in the desalination plant in Sorek 2 or 3 years ago. So we invite you to be part of us and join, any activity that the JNF is doing. And I would like to end with a quote from the, our late president of Israel, Shimon Peres. We're cultivating fish without water, veggies without soil, and lettuce without roots. We take salt out of the sea and sand out of the desert. Thank you very much for listening. I'm more than happy to answer any questions you might have, and I'm here for you.
Thank you, Tali. We do have some questions. Bill, you want to ask Tali a few, and we'll take it from there. Bill? Where is he? All right. So Tali, one of the questions I had when you were talking about the desalination plants and Gaza, did I hear you correctly that you said Israel offered the government in Gaza to build a desalination, and they turned it down?
Yeah, and I'll explain, okay? I'll explain. Thank you for the excellent question. Thank you. I'll explain. Guys, Gaza is the same, vicinity of Israel. They have no water. So what they're doing, while we, the Israelis, cannot drill down in the aquifer and take as much water as we want, there is no control over Gaza. So there are over 30,000 drillings in the vicinity of Gaza, because under every building they're drilling and pumping water from the aquifer that has no borders. I'm reminding you, the aquifer is Gaza and Ashkelon and Beersheba. It's the same aquifer. What happens to an aquifer when you pump too much? There are no vacuums on Earth, right? Immediately the salty water from the Mediterranean will get in and destroy the aquifer forever. It's our interest, first of all, that the Gazanians will have good life, and live, with enough money, food, water, anything that they need, because the more they have, the less, conflict we have. That's one. Second of all, if they're pumping water, they have no water, and they're pumping water from the same aquifer that we have, underneath Beersheba, Ashkelon, and the surrounding area, they're destroying the same aquifer because there are no borders. That's why Israel is willing to help Gaza to build a desalination plant and to find investors to do that and to teach them the technologies. And they say, no, 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 we don't need your help because they don't want. And that's why Israel is helping Judea and Samaria, the West Bank, to build water reservoirs and teaching them how to recycle water so that their sewage, and sewage doesn't have to be our restroom. Sewage can be, or wastewater can be, the sludge of the production of the olive oil that they run into the rivers that run from the Judea and Samaria into the Hebron River, into the Beersheba River, into the Besor River. We're cleaning and they're sending the sludge into. That's why Israel, in order to protect the aquifers and in order to protect our rivers, would love to help the Palestinians, whether in the West Bank or in Gaza, to build, and to plan for, for protecting the water.
Billy, another question?
Yeah, thank you, Tali. What about the possible desalination plant joint project with Jordan and Aqaba?
Okay, so I don't know how many of you heard about the Dead Canal and the Red Dead Canal. There are, ideas through, I would say, the last 3 decades even, of bringing water from the Mediterranean all the way to the Dead Sea and creating energy and filling it with water, etc., etc. For that, Jordan said no. Remember that the Dead Sea belongs to Israel and Jordan, okay? We cannot make a decision to fill the Dead Sea without getting the approval of the Jordanian. If the Jordanian have water in their faucets only once a week, their main interest is to have more water. They couldn't care less, excuse me for saying it, but they couldn't care less about the Dead Sea now. They want more water in their faucets. The World Bank and the world, water authorities would help Jordan because they're such a poor country and with no water, they would give them more money. So the Jordanians said, okay, you want to fill the Dead Sea with water? Fine. But the desalination plant will be built in Aqaba, across the border or across the Red Sea from Eilat. The water from Aqaba will be supplied to your communities in Eilat, in the Arava area, and so on. And in return, we're going to get more water from the Kinneret. You're giving us now 50 million cubic meter, you're going to give us more. And the brine is the leftover of the desalination process, will be flown all the way from Eilat to the Dead Sea, helping the Dead Sea to recover, not solving its problem, but helping the Dead Sea to recover. Why it hasn't yet happened? Because despite the peace treaty with Jordan, there's a lot of tension. I'm sure all of you, hearing the news from time to time, there are a lot of, issues within the embassy and between the borders and the trust. And to invest in a building desalination plant, it takes, billions of dollars. And you also need the commitment of the country to buy water from the desalination plant. Otherwise, nobody is going to invest in building a desalination plant. And to do that, you need a commitment also from Jordan, not only from Israel, to buy. And Jordan is a very poor country. So because of trust, because of tension, because of lack of money, it hasn't yet happened. It is still, though, on the table, waiting for the day that, we will be able to build it.
Thank you, Tali. And then we'll get to one more and then we'll transition to Matt. Has Israel ever given states, other countries, governments advice on water issues?
Oh, Israel has a memorandum of understanding with a lot of countries on how to save water, how to treat water, how to build reservoirs, desalination plants, technologies, etc., etc. Starting with Iran from 40 years ago, okay? Today, Iran is using 95% of its water for agriculture. So you can only imagine if I told you that the average is 65, what do they have left in their faucets, okay? Iran, South Africa, Cape Town didn't want to take any advice from Israel, but California has a memorandum of understanding with Israel. Arizona has an MOU with Israel. Nevada has an MOU with Israel. Colorado has an MOU with the state of Israel. There's a biannual conference in Israel called WATEC, where the Israeli water technology is being presented to everyone, and missions from all over the world coming to Israel, you know, and getting to understand and to purchase and, you know, to get the knowledge. Israel is willing to share its knowledge. It's not just about, you know, how much it costs. When it comes to technology companies, yes, they will sell their technology, but Israel as a country is willing to share its knowledge with the world, and the knowledge is open. And any governor, any, you know, leader of any country who comes to Israel and asks for water solutions, including the Emirates and Saudi Arabia, they're all getting, you know, the Israeli know-how.
Thank you. And I know we do have a few more questions. We will get those answered for you and get them sent back to you in the form of an email, just so we can make sure we can keep the program moving.
Thank you, Tali. And I say to all of us who are on to really appreciate well, all of this and all of the work that Jewish National Fund is doing. You got to go see it for yourself. You could see it through the virtual tours, but the truth is, when we start traveling again, hopefully next spring, come on one of our missions. We do a over 55 mission for 10 days. We'll do one next year in May and in April, and you'll see it all for yourself. It's an amazing thing, and you'll feel, look what my contributions are doing. So thank you, Tali. I'm going to take a couple of minutes, and I'm going to share my screen. And just wait a sec. And we're going to talk about, because it's really important this time of year. We're coming to the end of the year, and you know, a lot of tax strategies on how to save some money, and also how to properly maybe make contributions to Jewish National Fund can tie in, because what we're talking about with water is the legacy. What is the legacy that the Jewish National Fund has left or is leaving? And what is the legacy that we want to leave? We want to leave the world better than when we came in. And some of the ways we do this is through the work of Jewish National Fund, and also the contributions through the contributions of our donors. So I just very briefly want to go through a couple of the ideas that one can put into use today to take care of tax strategies, saving some money, and making yourself, you know, towards the end of the year. So we are one of the many charities that offer charitable gift annuities, and it's a very popular service that we offer our donors. Simply what a charitable gift annuity is, it offers a way which a donor makes a gift to us, either through cash or stock, and they get consistent, dependable income over 1 or 2 lifetimes. There are tax benefits. And the great thing is besides all of the stuff you get, the income and the tax benefits, you get to support the land and people of Israel today, while the money comes to us sometime in the future. It's a very simple thing to do. You simply make a tax-deductible gift based upon your age. We will pay you income guaranteed for as long as you live. When you're finished using the money, when you've passed on, the money comes back to Jewish National Fund for our Jewish National Fund projects. So what we wanted to show you is that the rates are very competitive. You know, we watch the markets here very carefully. I staff the investment committee, so I know exactly how our investments are doing. And in a world where if you went out and bought a 30-year treasury bond, you might earn 1 or something percent, or a 10-year bond, you might earn 8.8%. These are the offerings that we have at various ages. So if you're 84 years old, or you're 80 years old, or you're 72 years old, you make a contribution, we'll pay you the income for as long as you live on that gift, quarterly, annually, or semi-annually. You could defer it. And the idea is it's a competitive way to earn income while you're making a gift and supporting the Jewish National Fund and then the land of people of Israel. So what we do know, however, is that wherever we are in the station of life, retirement, pre-retirement, we always need some money somewhere earning some kind of income. And that's what the gift annuity is for. It's a gift you're going to make to Jewish National Fund and then receive income for as long as you live, along with some very good tax benefits. The tax benefits are an income tax deduction, and a lot of the income comes back to you free of income tax on a tax-free basis. So when you look at the income and then you look at your after-tax return, you get to say to yourself, not a bad thing to do from a financial perspective, and it's a great thing to do from a charity perspective in supporting Jewish National Fund. So if you have any questions, type them and Bill will send them to me. Okay. The other thing that we're offering, and it's become extremely popular for our donors, is Jewish National Fund is one of the few charities, that operates its own donor-advised fund. What a donor-advised fund is, in its simplest form, is a charitable giving account. You make a contribution to the fund, you get a full tax deduction for making your contribution. You take your money, you advise us how you want to invest it within the pools of mutual funds that we offer, and then you recommend grants to Jewish National Fund and other charities that you would like to support. So the way it works is it's terrific, especially this time of year, because we know our donors are philanthropic. They want to make charitable contributions. So instead of writing out 5 or 10 or whatever it is number of checks in December, you make one grant, you make one check to your donor advised fund. You tell the donor advised fund where you want to send the money, and it will be done for you either through contact with our office, or you have access to a web portal 24/7 that allows you to see what you've given, change your investments, look at your balance. It is a full experience donor advised fund. And what's really terrific about it, I believe, is that you make your contribution to the donor advised fund, and then you have the ability at your timing and at your discretion to make grants. So if you're going to make grants in December, give it to the donor advised fund. You'll get your full tax deduction, even if you made the gift up to December 31st. Over the course of the year, you make your decision. Who do I want to give to? How much do I want to give to? And as long as it's a qualified 501c3 charity, your donor advised fund will make those grants for you. The fees are very low. It's 25 basis points, 1/4% for any contribution from $10,000 to $1 million. At $1 million, we don't charge you anything for the donor advised fund. So if you will look at what our offering is versus what you might see commercially, you're going to see a very competitively priced on a fee basis, and with full web access. So we ask you to take a look at that. And I will tell you that the growth in the donor advised fund for us has been astronomical. I think we started last year when we opened up our donor advised fund portal. We had 12 donor advised funds. We now have over 68, and it's growing by the day. So it's something you should take a look at. It works. People love it. It's easy. It's giving made simple, and it's personal. And you get to, one of the great things about it, the other is that you get to share your donor advised fund with family. So the family can get together and make philanthropic decisions together. We want to give X amount of dollars here, a Y amount of dollars there. And it makes for a really good philanthropic intergenerational tool to teach philanthropy, not only from yourself, but to your children. So we allow you to pass that donor advised fund, the money and the rights to succeeding generations. And we know that people have reacted very strongly to it, very positive, and it's a terrific, terrific thing to look at. One of the last great tax breaks, especially the end of the year, although this year it's a little different, is give money from your IRA. Leave the Jewish National Fund or any charity your IRA because it is the most taxed asset that you have, and we can show you exactly how that can work for you and for your family. The other thing we want to let you know is part of this is that the Secure Act was passed in January 2020. The CARES Act to take care of the pandemic was passed in March of 2020. And there are some really interesting provisions that enhance charitable giving. Give us a call and we could show you some very interesting ideas. The last thing we want to talk about is a bequest. A very simple way to leave a legacy is to simply name Jewish National Fund in your will or your living trust. This is a picture of a family that made a contribution to Jewish National Fund through their will when they passed away. It's a picture of John and Dora Baruchin with Dora's sister. And we're just proud to say it because he got was thoroughly impressed with the work that we do. I want to tell Tali that what attracted him to the Jewish National Fund was what we did with water. He lives in the desert in California. He left us his estate after taking care of his children, and the amount of the gift was over $200 million. So he left a legacy, and we would like all of our donors to leave a legacy for themselves, for their children, and for the work that the Jewish National Fund does on behalf of the land and people of Israel. And that's it. So that's our story for today. It's all about legacy. The legacy Jewish National Fund is leaving in Israel, the legacy that we want to leave for ourselves and our children, and the work that we do. So if there are any questions, I'm happy to take them. Anyone?
Matt, there are a few questions.
Oh.
First one is, can you fund a gift annuity with your IRA? With your
The
individual?
answer is, it's a complicated question. The answer is theoretically you can, but talk to us because it involves some maneuvering. But the answer is yes, you can.
And the next question, does a gift annuity qualify for the 100% deduction available through the CARES Act?
The answer is we believe it does. But here's the thing about the gift annuity. When you contribute to a gift annuity, let's say you put in $25,000, and you have to say to yourself, well, yes, I put in this is what the government says. Yes, you put in $25,000, but you're going to take out 7% a year in income. So the whole $25,000 isn't a charitable gift. It's the portion that you're not going to receive back. So out of a $25,000 gift, maybe $12,000, maybe $10,000 is your charitable contribution. And that amount does qualify this year for the 100% deduction. What else?
So we have a couple of questions about the donor advised fund.
Go.
The first one is, do you have to spend a certain amount of money year to year with the donor advised fund? And the second one has to do with what type of assets can you use to put in the donor advised fund?
So one of the things that makes the donor advised fund such an incredibly flexible vehicle is that you do not, as of now, the law does not require you to make grants ever. So you could create the donor advised fund, let your money build for a number of years, you don't pay taxes on it, and you make grants at your discretion, at your timing, to whomever you wish. So the answer to the question is you do not have to make annual grants out of your donor advised fund. I wanted to bring up just one more point. Donor advised funds are so popular around the country that today the largest charity in the United States by assets is not the Heart Foundation or the United Way, it's the Fidelity Charitable Gift Fund. People love them, they work, they're flexible, and people are able to satisfy their charitable needs through them. Cynthia, what was question number? What assets can a donor advised fund take?
Yep.
Almost anything. Stock, cash, real estate, closely held businesses. So give us a call and we'll show you how to do it. We have the expertise to handle almost any complexity gift, as long as it's legal. That's what I like to say. But the answer to the question is almost any asset can be put into a donor advised fund.
Do we have time for one more question?
One more, and then, yeah.
So the last question has to do with if I have kids, can I have my kids become involved in the donor advised fund?
Yeah, the way we run it, yes. When a husband, wife, or a family, or the original donors pass on, they can pass the rights of that donor advised fund to make grants, to do anything they wish to another, someone else, a succeeding generation. And what we stipulate there is it'll be for their lifetimes or 20 years, whichever occurs first. So if you're of a certain age, you give the donor advised fund privileges to children, they could make grants and use that money for a minimum of 20 years, for a maximum of 20 years, or their life, whichever happens to come around first. Okay?
Thank you.
So we're going to leave you all, say thank you for joining us. I think the next program is next Thursday, and the topic is going to be tax tips and things and tax planning for the end of year. We're going to have, is it a CPA, Cynthia?
Yeah, he's a CPA, works mostly with high net worth individuals and small family businesses, but has a lot of great suggestions in terms of planning for this last quarter of 2020.
It's we've had an interesting year, to say the least, right? We've seen the pandemic hit and the economy crash. Stock market has done unbelievably well. So there's a lot of planning that has to go into minimizing whatever your tax burden might be at the end of this year. And next week at 4 o'clock, we will have some very interesting ideas for you. So thank you all. We're going to be sending out, whoever came on today, we're going to be sending you our free Jewish National Fund Wills Guide through a PDF file. It has fill it out. It's a great publication to leave to your children, because it will show where everything is and actually shows you what you want, how you want your money distributed. So look for that over the next couple of days. All right, thank you all. Enjoy.
Thank you, Talia.
Thank you. Thank you, Tali.
Thank you, Tali. Yes.
My pleasure. It was a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Good deal.
Toda.
Ta-da.
Okay.
Goodbye, all. Thank you so much. We hope to see you next week.